What are the craziest declassified CIA documents? The plan after 9/11 to make figurines that look like Osama bin Laden and give them to kids in South Asia. After it's left in the sun for a certain amount of time, its face would peel off to reveal a demon-like visage with red skin, green eyes, and black markings, basically a demon. The objective was to scare kids and their parents so bin Laden and Al-Qaeda would lose support. The acoustic kitty is pretty crazy. Declassified CIA docs linked at bottom of Wikipedia page. They basically put a microphones and radio in a cat and tried to release into the Soviet embassy to wander around eavesdropping since nobody suspects a wandering cat. Technical difficulties. Citation needed episode that I learned about it from. One CIA operative who drew up a plan to have packets of extra-large condoms labeled small dropped on USSR. The idea was to lower their morale. The Pentagon Papers, which were leaked, not outright declassified, and the resultant Church Committee report. These are what made public the CIA's actions in overthrowing governments and instigating, assisting coups all over the world for decades leading up to the 70s. Pretty much every negative stereotype of the CIA we have today was created or informed by the Pentagon Papers and Church Committee report. All the failed assassination attempts against Fidel Castro. According to Fabian Escalante, who worked for the Cuban counterintelligence, there were 638 of them. Here are some highlights. In 1960 they tried to poison his cigars. They asked the Chicago mob for help and they said poison pills are the best. The mobsters hired a local assassin who gave them to a ice cream milkshake parlor employee who was supposed to slip them into Castro's ice cream. When he tried to get the poison pills from the freezer, they were frozen solid on the coils of the freezer. They planned to put explosives under a painted seashell, as Castro loved to go scuba diving and collect seashells. The plan was discarded as impractical. In the same year they contaminated a scuba diving suit for Castro with a fungus that should give Castro a deadly disease. The person tasked with this, American lawyer James Donovan, who was negotiating the release of hostages after the Bay of Pigs invasion, couldn't do it in the end. They trained his lover to poison him, but she got cold feet. They had a James Bond-like idea of poisoning him with a tiny needle attached to a ballpoint pen. The government official who was supposed to stab him with that needle threw the pen away, as he was too afraid that the needle might accidentally poison him instead. Last but not least, they had the idea to assassinate his character by spraying ALSD-like chemical into the broadcasting studio where he held his speeches. The idea was to make him look confused and unfit to rule. The plan was abandoned as the chemical was unreliable. Edit. Some corrections to the second and sixth attempt in this list. Psychological warfare in the Philippines in the 1950s comes to mind. The CIA conducted research to figure out which sort of myths and superstitions the Philippine people had. They discovered that they were afraid of vampires. At one point they disrupted a group by snatching a local man, murdering him, and putting teeth marks on his neck. They then hung him upside down for his friends to find, which terrified the village. This was all part of an effort to elect Ramon Magsaysay as president, who basically acted as a puppet for the U.S. The CIA wrote his speeches and directed his policy. You can download most of Osama bin Laden's hard drive off the CIA's website. It's got a fair few licensed movies, anime, games, that sort of thing, all free for anyone who wants to get it. Operation Sea Spray, a 1950 U.S. Navy secret biological warfare experiment in which Sriracha Marcescens and Bacillus globigi bacteria were sprayed over the San Francisco Bay Area in California. In order to determine how vulnerable a city like San Francisco may be to a bioweapon attack, between 1949 and 1969, open-air tests of biological agents were conducted 239 times. In 80 of those experiments, the Army said it used live bacteria that its researchers at the time thought were harmless. MKUltra, but unfortunately the only documents we got from it are from an off-site storage space that the officials in the CIA forgot about. Also the CIA document that says the political structure of the USSR wasn't a one-man one rule, or the one talking about how Tibet was a feudal backwater. CIA checking what we know. Project Paperclip, taking former Nazi scientists from Germany to America to hopefully beat the Soviets in the space race. One of the craziest declassified CIA documents is Operation Midnight Climax, where the CIA dosed unsuspecting individuals with LSD as part of mind control experiments. It reads like a spy novel, but unfortunately, it's a disturbing chapter in history. The ghost tapes with creepy noises that were played in Vietnam to try and scare the Viet Cong was pretty crazy. Not the most crazy, but worth a mention. U.S. military advisors saying that an armed conflict in Vietnam can't be won due to the general sentiment and freedom movement they'd fight, that the Vietnamese liberation movement would continue no matter what or who would actually end up leading it. Second being Nixon sabotaging and delaying peace talks in Vietnam so he could blame it as LBJ's failure and win the election. The simple sabotage field menu, made by the Office of Strategic Services, which was the CIA before they were given the name. A guide on how to do simple sabotage in the USSR. Funny enough, their guide on how managers can sabotage work sounds a lot like how much companies work today. Quote, 1. Demand written orders. 2. Misunderstand orders. Ask endless questions or engage in long correspondence about such orders. Quibble over them when you can. 3. Do everything possible to delay the delivery of orders. Even though parts of an order may be ready beforehand, don't deliver it until it is completely ready. 4. Don't order new working materials until your current stocks have been virtually exhausted, so that the slightest delay in filling your order will mean a shutdown. 5. Order high-quality materials which are hard to get. If you don't get them, argue about it. Warn that inferior materials will mean inferior work. 6. In making work assignments, always sign out the unimportant jobs first. See that the important jobs are assigned to inefficient workers of poor machines. 7. Insist on perfect work in relatively unimportant products. Send back for refinishing those which have the least flaw. Approve other defective parts whose flaws are not visible to the naked eye. 8. Make mistakes in routing so that parts and materials will be sent to the wrong place in the plant. 9. When training new workers, give incomplete or misleading instructions. 10. To lower morale and with it, production, be pleasant to inefficient workers. Give undeserved promotions. Discriminate against efficient workers. Complain unjustly about their work. 11. Hold conferences when there is more critical work to be done. 12. Quote, rest in PDF. It's an interesting read, but if you want to read more on the office side, it starts on page 28 in the scanned booklet, or page 18 of the PDF. https /www.chia.gov/static/5C8755F3X660E092CF893F60B4A288DF/simplesabotage.pdf. My previous answer to another post. https://www.theblackvault.com/ Not sure if this has been mentioned or not. I'm not scrolling through a million replies. The site is run by a guy named John Greenewald. Black Vault started putting in FOIA requests when he was 15 and never stopped. Currently has what is arguably the largest privately owned collection of declassified information from the US government anywhere, and the entire archive is accessible for free. Not a direct answer to your question, but anything you want to know about stuff the US government was up to can be found buried in there. And he's taken the time to sort some of the more interesting stuff out to make browsing easier. Cheers! The craziest declassified CIA documents are the ones written as red herrings for spies back in the Cold War, like the one that detailed their psychic experiments with remote viewing that granted the US the capability to see anywhere at any point in time whenever they want, by using Mars as a target and looking into the past to see a recent Martian civilization at various points in time. Operation Northwoods. The DoD proposed that CIA operatives plant bombs around the United States and commit terrorist acts, and blame them on Cuba. This was approved all the way up to, but not including, the President. https://en.m.wikipedia.org/wiki/Operation Northwoods. During the 60s, the CIA noticed that artists tend to lean towards socialism and communism. They realized the best way to prevent this or discredit these political positions was to make them wealthy so they would be more invested in capitalism. To do this, the CIA would anonymously buy modern art pieces, no matter how nonsensical, for very high prices. This made the otherwise highly niche and difficult to access modern art genre a chic, fashionable, and highly profitable genre, and basically prevented prominent members of the art community from turning to socialism or communism by converting them to wealthy members of the upper class. TL. Dr. The spolied nouveau riche avant-garde airhead artist stereotype was literally created by the CIA, dumping money into prominent figures' pockets and allowing them to discredit their political activism by becoming self-indulgent parodies of themselves. The papers describing astral projection. They brought a psychic in and placed an envelope with coordinates and a time frame on it. They asked him to describe what he saw. He described a dying planet where people had left to discover a new place they could populate. It was revealed that the envelope contained coordinates on Mars in the distant past. It gets much more in depth where he describes large structures, etc. It's not very long and very much worth the read. Edit. https://www.chia.gov/readingroom/docs/churd9600788R001900019.pdf.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epicaricast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.